Hey guys, hope everyone's doing good. I am Rob, I'm a violin teacher, and in this video today I'm going to share with you a little bit about how to build a solo. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps with the algorithm. I very much appreciate it. And I've dealt with a lot of students that were classically trained, and when they get into improv, it can seem really daunting to you. And so during a song, when you're playing rock, country, blues, jazz, bluegrass, gospel, any of these pop music, any of these genres, you'll be asked to do kind of a number of different things. Sometimes you'll have little riffs that are actually like written out that you'll have to play in the song, like maybe in the intro or in a bridge somewhere or something. And then you'll also have some times where you're just going to be like comping and you're just going to be throwing in little stuff where like the singer is singing, for example. But in other spots, you might ask to have like kind of a feature and have a solo where you come out and you're sort of the star of the show or you're featured, right? So when you have these moments, there's sort of a number of different ways that you can do a solo. That's what's so fun about especially things like jazz or rock or anything, is that you get to kind of put your own flavor on it. But there is sort of a basic way to kind of come at this, especially for a beginner. And that's what this video is really for. It's for people who have never really improv before, and they sort of can kind of figure out how to do it, but they want more tricks on how to be better at it. So when you're doing a solo, the basic idea is that you want to build the energy, right? So that's the umbrella term that we're thinking about, is building the energy. And so it's going to work exactly like a movie, right? So you're going to start off with some dialogue or something, and then you're going to be building the characters. There's going to be some conflict, and it's going to build, and then at the end you have like the conflict resolution or the big battle scene or whatever, right? But you're going to be building it. It's going to look something like this. You're going to build, and then maybe right at the end you might come back down into calm again, right? The whole idea is that you want to build the energy, okay? So there's a whole bunch of different ways to do this. These are not the only four, but these are four that we're going to focus on for this video. So one easy way that's very obvious to understand is that you start off sort of soft and build your volume, right? Build the loudness of your solo, going from soft to loud, right? Another way that you can do this is that when we have our low notes, sometimes they don't cut through as much as we would like. And for some reason, I don't know why this is, but high notes tend to cut through and be a little bit more piercing sometimes. So you can definitely go from like low notes to high notes. For us, that's going to be like starting on kind of G, D, and A string for violins. And then by the end, you're sort of on the A and E string, right? Another way that you can do this is with the intensity, is you can start with sort of longer notes or slower notes and then build to sort of shorter or faster stuff, right? So for the classical people, this would be like, half note, quarter note, and eighth note stuff. And then by the end, you're doing like sort of quarter note, eighth note, 16th note kind of stuff, right? So you're going to be building faster notes. And then another really little trick that you can use is you can start using space. Right? So you play little like phrases or little riffs at first, and then use a little space, because that's not going to come off as quite as aggressive. And then as you build, you're going to not use as much space and play sort of more notes, just like the shorter, faster stuff. Right? And so you're going to be using this general framework is a good place to start. So let's say that you have, as an example, let's say you're doing like a blues tune. Right, and this again will work for any rock or country or what. This will work for a lot of different things, especially jazz. But let's say you have 2 rounds. So in a 12-bar blues, you have 12 bars, and then it just repeats over and over and over, even with the vocals, even with the solo, whatever. Right. So let's say you have round 1, and you've got your 12 bars, and then you have a second round of 12 bars. So you've got 24 bars to make your solo. And the idea here is that you're going to be planning this out. You don't have to plan literally everything out, but you want to make some sort of a plan in your head, right? So you're going, and you're building. if you're going to do this building thing, by the time you get to the start of your second solo, you should be like up a bit, right? Maybe even as loud, maybe even pretty darn loud. But the idea is that you're building it. And this works just like dynamics too. Let's say we have our 24 bars where we're going to be going from loud to soft. In bar 6, we don't want to be at complete, utter like forte, right? Because then we have nowhere to go. Right, and we're just doing loud the rest of the time. So you want to sort of plan this out. So you're build, and around the middle of the first one, you shouldn't quite be loud yet necessarily, right? So let me sort of demonstrate what I'm talking, and I'll kind of call out some stuff as I go. But I'm gonna try to do a solo, sort of demonstrating using some of these things, and then we're pushing and building. Okay, so here we go. Right, so you could see that time I definitely used a little bit of space at the beginning. I did a couple of phrases. I definitely used a lot of long notes in the beginning, and then I went to all of that triplet stuff at the end. Right, and so I used a much faster kind of triplet pattern. I definitely went from, I wasn't quite piano necessarily, but I started off relatively soft, and by the end I was definitely loud. And then I absolutely started on kind of my lower G and D, and then I went to the higher stuff. Right, over to the E string. By the end I'm... Right, and then you're up at higher. Right? So this sort of framework is going to work for any instrument, right? Guitar, piano, saxophone, whatever, any instrument, you can use the same general framework. Right? So let me demonstrate now what a not good solo would sound like, or sort of a more boring solo, right? And so I'll kind of you'll be able to see that I'm not really building it. I'm going to try to purposefully keep it sort of like monotone, right? So let's try this. So you can hear on that one, I kind of started out, first of all, with my loudness. I started out sort of medium loud, and I just sort of stayed there. And then towards the end, I didn't get louder. I also went softer, right? So I didn't build that correctly at all that time. Definitely low and high notes, I didn't do anything like that. I just sort of stayed in the middle. I went up to E string maybe once, but I just sort of stayed in the middle the whole time. I didn't really go anywhere, right? Definitely longer or shorter notes, I played those same rhythms. Right? I just played the same sort of swing beat the entire time. I didn't have difference between it, right? And then I didn't really use hardly any space. Maybe one time I stopped in there, but I didn't really use space, right? So the point is that I didn't make that solo different in any way. It was just sort of stagnant and boring the entire time. I'm gonna do another video if you guys are interested here in a little bit about how to create like differences in your improv. I think what happens a lot is people kind of practice and they get some ideas, and then at some point they kind of start playing the same stuff over and over. And so this is going to be really difficult if you're playing the same stuff all the time in your solo. Like when you don't have any differences in your rhythm, like on that last one, I kind of did the same rhythm the entire time. And so you want to come up with different ideas for your different rhythms and different ways that you can deal with your dynamics or articulations or different kind of stuff like that, right? So that one sort of fell flat on its face, right? It wasn't a very good solo. It was just kind of boring, right? It's not that it was bad, it just wasn't boring, or it was boring, right? Now, the one other thing that you can understand about this thing is what's so fun about this is the general framework, but you can break these rules like crazy. There's a lot of ways to do a solo, right? For example, some people a lot of times can start and just keep it loud the whole time, but you can really adjust everything else in your solo and it can really sound different and sound really cool throughout, especially if you're doing kind of a loud song. You don't want to start off piano if you're doing like a Metallica solo, right? Or something that's really aggressive. You want to keep it pretty loud, but you can absolutely change the low to high notes. You can absolutely use loud but space. Like use phrasing and stuff like that. You can absolutely use longer tones to faster stuff, right? So there's different ways to do this. So I'm going to demonstrate that now, is how to do a solo, but I'm not going to do all of these. And we'll talk about and show you what I did here in a second. So that one, I purposefully didn't do any real fast notes. I kind of kept it all relatively long. But there was times when I was trying to do the... right? And there I was doing some double stops, right? And so with that tritone, that is fulfilling my energy problem, right? So when I have that dissonance, I'm really like building the tension there, right? So I didn't do the short notes thing, but I think it came off that I was like sort of building it more than earlier, right? I definitely did the low notes to high notes thing. I think I did use a little bit of space at the beginning. And soft to loud, I did some of that. So you can do one or more or none or whatever. I mean, you can deal with this in a number of different ways. You can definitely not necessarily have to go way up on your E string to be able to get this energy difference. Right? So there's a bunch of different ways that you can sort of do this, and there's no like perfect way to deal with this. Lots of people do some awesome solos and don't always follow this. So these are just, this is just a framework of, at the beginning, you want to kind of do something like this. And the key, I think, is that, again, I said that I'm going to talk about this in another video, is to really like switch up your improv. When you're doing it over and over and over the same way, you're just going to get a really boring solo. And so we'll talk in another video about how to do that and how to think of different ideas to play. Because this is really difficult if you play the same thing, right? So you have to have sort of what we call the toolbox idea, where you have to have a bunch of different little ditties that you can play, and so that you can pick and choose. So you're mapping that out with your 24 bars. I'm going to do I'm going to do my long tone stuff at the beginning. Right? And so then, and then you map out, all right, and then I'm going to start to do different rhythms here. And then maybe I'll go to 16ths or like a fast triplet kind of stuff. And then I go to the next thing and the next thing and that, right? And you don't always have to completely plan out exactly what you're doing, but you have the general framework in your head of, I'm going to build this, right? So I would try this idea at first and practice these different techniques. You could do and what I would do if I were you is I would pick one of these, right? So let's say soft to loud and do a 2-round solo and make yourself do soft to loud, or pick use space and then end up not using space at the end, right? So I would pick one of these and work on these as an exercise of just practice, and then add a second one to it. Right, so I would try that, and with this, you're also going to need to know how many rounds you're doing, right? Before you start would be helpful. Sometimes you might get one, if it's like a slow tune, you're going to want to do one big slow round, right? But if it's faster and you're done faster, then you might do 2 or 3 or maybe 4 sometimes, right? And the last thing that I'll say is, this stuff is going to really depend on what song you're playing, right? So I'll give you an example. So if you have a kind of slower song that's not supposed to be rip-roaring, right, you're going to take the same framework, but you might, for example, not go into very fast stuff if you're doing a ballad or something, right? Sometimes if you're rip-roaring, the slow notes might not make very much sense. You're going to do sort of medium notes to fast notes. Right? If you're playing a rip-roaring song, you may not pull all the way down, right? You may start at like a medium kind of volume and go loud, and then you can use your other stuff, right? And so a lot of times I'll hear people like Charlie Parker, famous jazz saxophone player, where it seemed like he was playing a lot of his up-tempo stuff on a ballad. And so you always want to keep your song in context when you're doing this kind of framework with your song about how much are we building this. On a ballad, you may not get up to super loud. On a loud, crazy stuff, you may not get all the way down to piano, right? You've got to put this in context with the song that you're playing, right? So that's a little bit of my thoughts on soloing. I have some clips of me playing on my channel if you want some more examples of people doing solos, especially on violin. And in more videos I'll explain more about improv and how you can do more exercises to help you get better and stuff like that. So that's what I got. Alright, go check out the channel, like and subscribe. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys on the next one. See ya.